The next show will start in 1 minute.
Streaming live from the Paul and Catherine Ranke Memorial Studio, this is TV Free Baltimore. Support for TV Free Baltimore comes from viewers like you. Become a TV Free Baltimore member by visiting patreon.com/TV Free Baltimore.
Hi. Hi. I'm Dawn Wells, and guess what? You are watching TV Free Baltimore.
Hello, TV Free Baltimore viewers. I'm happy to say we're back with another episode of Live from Annapolis, starring Delegate Lauren Aricon. And I want to begin with talking about taxes. And as we all know, that Baltimore County moved significantly to the liberal left with the election of Johnny Oleski and the current county council. And as soon as Oleski came to power, he raised taxes. Crime, unfortunately, has skyrocketed, and he passed new laws making it harder for small business owners, particularly landlords and gun shop owners. And now there's a significant change in leadership down in Annapolis, and I want to talk about that. And the question that I want to lead into is, will the state government also begin to raise taxes on top of the Oleski Baltimore County tax hikes? Hello, how have you been?
Good, still here, still surviving.
Good. So there's been some changes in leadership, both in Baltimore County and down in Annapolis. I was wondering if the changes in Annapolis are also taking the state further to the liberal left as Baltimore County has gone.
I would say for sure it has. I can't really speak in depth on the Senate yet, but for the House, I'd say the leadership has definitely moved to the left. The Speaker herself has put in a gun registration bill. I could never imagine Bush doing such a thing. So yeah, I'd say we're definitely moving to the left.
And what's the tax hikes looking like down in Annapolis? Are we going to have some tax hikes coming out this year?
So yeah, I think that what's going to happen is we're going to lose a lot of tax credits. I don't know if they're going to actually put in any increases in taxes this year, because they did some polling themselves and we did some polling, and it turns out neither party voters want to see their taxes go up in the state of Maryland. So my guess is that what they're going to do is they're going to focus on removing tax credits for businesses to move to opportunity zones, to lower income areas. They're going to get rid of every tax break that they've ever given to try and increase jobs. They're going to remove all of them from every possible place they can find them. It's like almost like they're going through every department with a vacuum, trying to suck up any tax credits they've ever given.
Well, that's not good to hear to my ears, and it seems like both in Baltimore County under Johnny Oleski and in Annapolis, it seems like if you take a step back, that the Democrats that are controlling both the state and Towson right now are embarked on public policy that just means constant tax hikes and constant intrusive legislation into people's lives. Are you seeing that down in Annapolis?
Yep. There is bills that make my hair stand on end in almost every committee that I've seen so far. I mean, It's very extreme. Now, whether or not they will pass, I do not know. We've already passed at least one gun bill this year that is totally dumb, ineffective, only built to make people like you and I go to prison, not meant to get criminals, but meant to create new criminals out of regular people. So, yeah, every single committee has just absolutely bonkers California extremism to the 10th degree. It's almost like Maryland said to California, "Hold my beer."
Oh, my beer, that's funny. I'm going to bring up some of the gun law, some of the legislation, so our viewers, if they want to dig into this a little bit deeper, they can. And okay, let's start with the $4 billion proposed annual increase in taxes to fund the Kerwin Commission. What are people saying about that in Annapolis?
Both parties know that they're not going to be able to raise taxes to pay for it. That bill will move. Today we just moved through the school construction piece, which I did vote for because it did give Baltimore County like over $400 million in addition to the normal the funding formula we normally use for school construction. So I thought it was a good deal for Baltimore County. It wasn't quite as good of a deal for Harford County, which I also represent, but it did give them more money than they normally get. So I did vote for that because we do need to work on our schools, especially in Baltimore County. I mean, some of the schools in Baltimore County are health hazards. I mean, they're not safe. So that was one piece. But yeah, the Kerwin Commission, I think they're having a joint hearing maybe on Monday for Ways and Means and Appropriations on the updated Kerwin bill. It's not my committee, but anybody can go and listen in on it. So if it's something that any of your viewers want to go and listen to, they can go to the joint hearing room, and I can try and send you the information about what time it's going to be at, and they can hear what the legislators are hearing about Kerwin. But essentially, it's a $4 billion a year tax hike, and there's, I think, no guarantee that any of the policies that they're trying to implement are going to be effective in any way at all. It's a really I can't even remember. I think they said like several hundred pages long is how long the bill is. And they've pulled from all of these countries that are totally homogeneous populations. Everybody in these populations essentially is the same, looks the same, is from the same ethnic background. Most of the countries were affluent countries, so already those two factors are nothing like this. And in many of them, they use corporal punishment for discipline in the classrooms.
God. You got to be kidding me.
Well, they're not going to apply that part of it in Maryland. They're using these other countries as examples of the best school systems and the best way to educate children. But our teachers in Maryland can't even keep control of their classrooms now because there's out of control children and they can't even keep them out of the room. Sometimes in Baltimore County schools, when a child is acting up, the entire rest of the class has to leave the room while that child breaks things and throws things because they didn't get what they wanted. I mean, we are talking, it's majorly out of control discipline-wise in our state. Children cannot learn. The regular kids can't learn in that kind of environment. So I have no clue what planet these people are living on, thinking that they can take what's going on in Singapore education system and apply it to America in any way, especially not in Maryland, where we have income disparity, we have ethnic diversity. There's just a lot of different factors that make us different than other places. I mean, one of the other countries is Finland. In Finland, the money follows the student. So if a family doesn't like the school system, they leave the school system and they go to a private school, and they can choose any private school they want, and their funds come with them. So, and none of those things are they planning to include. They're not going to be adopting corporal punishment in our schools, and they're not going to be allowing the money to follow the child. So I'm really shocked that they've been so narrowly focused and so really ignorant to the application of from one country to another and who the population really is. It's terrifying, actually, especially if it's going to have a $4 billion price tag on it.
Yeah, wow. I have a friend of mine that just pulled his kid out of Parkville Middle School and got into some special school that's over, I think, in White Marsh, where the class sizes are much smaller. And, well, when you're on the floor in Annapolis, I mean, what are people saying about raising taxes and how that's going to solve the problems that we have in the schools?
The Democrats always believe that more money is going to help. More money is always better, which is ironic because in Harford County, for example, I think our funding, our spending per pupil, may be one of the lowest in the entire state. Maybe actually the 24th out of 24 counties. But on most of the metrics for success, we're like eighth. I mean, we're doing well with way less money. So, but they don't ask about that. They don't want to know what are the successful counties doing differently, and with less funds. They just want to spend more, spend more, spend more. And the Democrats think it's going to work. I don't know why. I mean, if Thornton didn't work, why would this?
Yeah, I don't know what to tell you about that. Let me get into some other specifics here. Let me pull up this email that I have. Okay, and this information comes from the Maryland Taxpayers Association, and they say that House Bill 222, which is in Ways and Means, adds 1% to income tax for net capital gains. HB 295, combined reporting for businesses. House Bill 473, carried interest, which attacks investment companies. HB 507, 4% increase in tax for pass-through income above $1 million. I mean, are they trying to push people with money out of the state, and the people that put the most amount of money into the coffers of the state, are they trying to push them out?
Yeah, clearly. I mean, are they crazy? My own parents left this state because of the atrocious taxes. They moved to Texas where you don't pay a state income tax. So yeah, that's exactly what this stuff does. I mean, they just try to punish people that have worked really hard and have a good income, which is delusional. I mean, those are the people that buy goods and services in our state at a very high rate. So they're just chasing people off. I mean, I think the feeling is they're chasing off mostly Republican voters, so they don't really care as much. But eventually, the tax base is going to shrink. I mean, I don't understand if they just don't think long term. They really don't. Same thing with the minimum wage laws from last year. They don't care if wage compression causes people to quit industries like, adult daycare. Who is going to take care of developmentally disabled people when everybody's quit their job because they can get the same amount of money being, a waitress? They don't care. They don't care.
As you've been talking, I've pulled up an old email that I got from last year, and I want to read it to our viewers because it's very telling about the loss of people that have money, the people that are paying money into to the coffers of the state and both the county. So let me read this to you because it's very eye-opening. This is dated February 17th, 2019. It says, Maryland loses revenues annually by driving out wage earners. Maryland continues to grow population, but those coming in make less money, and a significant number may become dependent on some form of welfare. According to IRS data, Maryland lost $1.6 billion and nearly 21,000 tax-paying citizens in 1 year from 2015 to 2016. So my question to you, Delegate, is are these facts being brought up onto the floor as these tax hikes are being debated?
No, we haven't had any floor debates yet about tax hikes. But I'm happy to bring it up once it does come up on the floor. I mean, maybe that information needs to be brought to, the Ways and Means Committee and the Appropriations Committee. They can first publicly shame them there. And that's terrifying, though. That statistic of 21,000 taxpayers leaving in 1 year, and that makes my hair stand on end. What are they doing? We have that kind of loss every year, with that much revenue lost every year. That's crazy. I mean, how will we sustain this? We are going to be worse than California before we even know it.
Well, what blows my mind is that here we are in Baltimore County, and we're right next to Baltimore City, and you can see what happens to a political jurisdiction when the productive people are pushed out, and you're left with people that don't make that much money, and
Right.
Section 8 renters, welfare recipients, all that. And it's just, to me, it's clear as day. And the thing that you really have to watch for is exodus of wealth. And Maryland's losing wealth. Baltimore County's losing wealth. Baltimore County experienced its first population decline last year. And Baltimore City's been depopulating for decades now. It seems like in Baltimore County we're going down the exact same road. And it just
Right.
amazes me that people like Johnny Oleski just don't get it. And what I'm afraid of is that the new leadership down in Annapolis just is incapable of getting it.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. They don't. It's all about getting reelected for them. It's not about making the state a better place. It's about making the state look like it's a better place in the newspaper so that they can get more funding for their campaigns. I mean, I wish I had like a less negative view on it, but that's the feeling that I get down there. Everybody's worried about themselves, and nobody's actually worried about making the state a better place for the citizens.
Yeah, for me, it's all about mechanics. The machinery of government. How does it best run? How's the best way of oil the machinery to give the citizens the services that they need? And if you're doing things that are pushing the productive people out, and in the end you're going to be losing tax revenue, to me it's a wake-up call, And
It should be.
Yeah, so I don't know why the people on the political left aren't looking at things like this.
I think when you have a supermajority, you just don't have to. It can pretty much do whatever they want to do, and it's not like Congress where it swings back and forth, where you could lose your power. There's no real pressure on Maryland Democrats to make the state actually function better. And a lot of our electorate is very uneducated. They believe what they see on the news. They think that mainstream media is telling them the truth about all these extremist policies. They think that they're going to help make the world a better place with these crazy leftist ideals, and they're just chasing all the regular people away, the ones that are happy to go to work every day and pay their taxes. They have no idea. I mean, there is a 0% chance that I am retiring in this state. And there's a 0% chance that most of the Democrats down there are going to retire in this state, because even they know they can't pay the taxes when they retire on a fixed income. I mean, who can?
Yeah, Maryland is always in the top 3 of worst states to retire in. And
Yeah.
I know I have relatives that complain all the time. I'm nearing retirement and looking at leaving. It's a shame, too, because that's going to be an emotional shock to me to not be able to age in place in a familiar the community that I've lived for my whole life. It's
Right.
just it's a damn shame.
I know,
Really
it's
is.
heartbreaking. My parents, they moved to Texas, but they still have their house here because it's hard for them to let go of the place they raised their children.
Yeah.
And they built that home from the bottom up. So
Yeah.
it's an emotional process, and
Yeah.
it's hard, but they're simply not willing to let their hard-earned money go to the state of Maryland when they see the direction that it's going in. I can't blame them, and I'm not going to do it either.
Let's get into the gun bills that are down there, because it's my understanding that they're just hitting the floor hard.
I
And,
mean,
in
I have
fact,
a 3-page thing of all the gun bills.
Well, then let me step back and you just inform the viewers, please.
I mean, it's so bad. I haven't even read all these. There's so many of them, and there are some support bills on here as well. Some ones that'll be good for us, but there's just almost too many to mention. I mean, there's clearly some focus on storage laws. They want to increase the penalties if you don't store your guns properly. I'm glad this camera can't pan to the left and see where my gun storage is. It's next to my bed, so I can shoot anybody that robs me, But it's bad. It's bad. There's all kinds of stuff. There's another one. Her bill is a ban, more banning guns that are pistols that are made by companies that make rifles they don't like, they think are scary. It's just nonsensical. It's more Bloomberg anti-gun, disarm the public because they're so much more obedient when they can't fight back. It's all that kind of just crap. Junk legislation doesn't make anyone safer. And the really sad thing is they don't seem to care if people are actually safer. They just want it to look like people are safer. They just want the headline to say that they've done something, but they don't actually care that we have 350 murders a year in Baltimore City. I mean, we had one of our delegates stand up and have a moment of silence for, a former resident of Maryland who moved down to another state, a young man. And we've never had a moment of silence for a single victim in Baltimore City, ever. I'm like, what planet are we living on? There was like a 72-year-old woman shot in the stomach who died. We didn't have a moment of silence for her. We didn't have a moment of silence for the poor woman in the city who was murdered in her beauty shop at 21 years old, who left behind a toddler who was just trying to make her life better. We didn't have a moment of silence for her. I mean,
I've heard some things about that someone made the comment that people were ready to riot over Freddie Gray, but here was this woman that was hardworking, achieving, and doing all the right things, and she gets killed, and it seems like the people in Baltimore City couldn't care less.
right.
Just amazing to me.
Yeah. It makes you sick. I mean, it makes you really sick, and they're so out of touch. That's what tells you that a lot of the stuff that moves policy is nothing but propaganda coming from extremists. It's just scary. It's scary. None of it is based on reality. It's all based on feelings alone. If you feel like this might be a good bill, and they'll say things like, if this could save just one life, I'm like, it would save a lot more than one life? Arming every single citizen in Maryland.
Exactly.
If every single citizen in Maryland was carrying a firearm, guess how many people would be getting shot and killed? Way less. Because the bad people would be terrified of losing their lives over some stupid robbery. It wouldn't be worth it because they'd know there would be somebody that could shoot back.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw the interview, but there was a situation last year where the FBI had just released a report that Baltimore City was the #1 city in the United States for people being robbed. There was a rash of them, and a guy came home from work. He had a permit to carry. He was going to become the next victim, and as soon as he put his hand on his gun and told the guys to back up, they all left.
Right.
Stop the crime. I mean, to me, it's...
Yeah. And he didn't even have to use the gun.
No, he didn't even have to pull it out. He just put his hand on it. They realized he had a...
Yeah.
Once they realized that he was armed, they just left.
Yeah. I mean, I wish that it didn't have to be like this. I mean, I hate that to feel safe in my own state, that I have to keep a firearm near me at all times. That's terrible. But that's the reality of where we're living.
It just seems like these politicians want to get into every nook and cranny into our lives and try to tax us. I'm going to share 2 personal experiences I just had. I got a letter from my bank saying, hey, guess what? Your escrows for your property taxes are short. Why? Because your property was just reassessed. It went up in value, so now you have to pay more taxes. And the one place that I did get some sort of relief from as far as taxes, and that was shopping online. I think since October, I've been paying Maryland sales tax when I go on eBay now. That was the one place where I could get some refuge from these heavy taxes from. So do you know why in October suddenly I had to pay the 6% Maryland sales tax on the internet?
Yeah, that was the bill last year that passed. I believe it was Delegate Pena Melnick's bill. I'm not sure if hers was one that passed last year, but I know she's had that bill in the past. But yeah, they passed a tax on internet sales. I think really what they did was tighten up an already existing tax. And I know that the Retailers Association was actually in support of it because, of course, they feel like they're losing money every day to online sales, Amazon, things like that. So it's just another way that they can put money in the coffers while simultaneously running off people from the tax base in the state of Maryland.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I feel under siege. When I started noticing that I'm paying that 6% sales tax on eBay,
Right.
which I hadn't done ever, And then with Oleski raising taxes, all the taxes that he raised on the county level, and also found out, you can clarify me and tell me if I'm wrong, if I am wrong, but the personal income tax that Oleski raised from 2.8% up to 3.2%, the reason he stopped at 3.2% because that's the highest allowable by state law. Is that true?
Yeah, yeah.
Is there any talk in Annapolis about taking that ceiling out or raising it?
That is the fear, right? That's what they would do. I don't think they can politically get away with it right now. I just think that it would mean that they would lose seats in the next election. Because I got to tell you, my friends who are Democrats also don't want to pay taxes more than they already are. In fact, they already don't like how much taxes they're paying. So if it starts to become the party of tax and spend any more than it already is, voters will literally not vote for them. I mean, Hogan won for a reason in a very blue state. People are sick to death of being taxed. So especially as the pool of taxpayers shrinks, and they expect the ones that are remaining to pay more and more and more. Mm-hmm. So they cannot do it this year.
Yeah, well, my personal experience has been that my friends that are Democrats are the old style Democrats, former union members, steel workers, that sort of thing, and they just look at their party and it's like, our party has gone from union members and steel workers to welfare recipients and Section 8 renters, and that's not us. And they're taking money from us to do things that we're not seeing come back to us in our lives.
Right.
And it just, like I said before, it just seems like whether you're talking about Johnny Oleski or the Baltimore County Council or now the people down in Annapolis, it's like they're trying to get into every nook and cranny and take. And
like I said, it's like a vacuum. They're just sucking up whatever they can, any penny they can find anywhere. There could be a couch cushion tax later where they come to everybody's house and they look in the couch cushions for more money. That's what it feels like.
Yeah, I mean I feel under siege personally.
Same.
Before we leave, do you want to say any kind words about your friend here that was in the studio earlier in the week?
Yes. I actually endorsed Danielle Hornberger for her race. I'm really, really pleased to have another strong Republican woman running out there. Cecil County deserves it. I know that they've had a lot of tax hikes in their own county, which is ironic considering it's been run by a Republican for the last several years. So yeah, I'm very much hoping that she's going to win. Her husband, Delegate Hornberger, is a friend of mine and a colleague down in Annapolis. Actually, his office is right next to mine, and he killed a very large boar over interim, and it is now proudly hanging on his wall. So if you do go to Annapolis, make sure to stop by his office and see that boar. It's impressive.
Nice. Yeah, I'd like to see that myself.
Yeah, it's a very, very impressive boar. So yeah, they're a great family, and I can't wait for her to help Cecil County get back on track and give people some tax relief over there who definitely deserve it in one of the most economically disenfranchised counties in our whole state. So they need some help for sure.
Great. Well, I want to thank you for coming on, and we'll have to do this next week, and then we'll take it from there. So to the viewers out there, stay tuned. We've got some interesting shows coming up, particularly the Paul Stefan show. He's doing a new show called Windows in the World. He interviews an author over in Germany about a book she wrote that's called Death is Not the End. It talks about life after death, so that should be very interesting. And once again, to you, Delegate Lauren Aricon, thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.
Happy to be here. See you next week.
Thanks.
This is Sam with Restore Computer Repair in Baltimore, Maryland. If you're having any computer problems whatsoever with your Mac or PC, desktop or laptop, we can fix it at a guaranteed lowest price. We're located at 8701 Harford Road in Parkville, Maryland, 21234. You can reach us at 443-725-5050. That's 443-725-5050. We're open Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 5:30 p.m., and Saturdays, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. You can reach us at www.restorecomputerrepair.com.
One day through television, the entire world will stream into our living rooms with the velocity of light. Not too far beyond the horizons, international television, to span oceans, capture all the vivid beauty of far lands, bind people of all nations tight together by better understanding, better knowledge, through instantaneous communication of sight and sound.
We now join the following program already in progress.
We talked about the families, we talked about all that. You have so much going on with you where, granted, you're a successful attorney. You can do whatever you want. I was going to ask you, why didn't you run for mayor? But I'm going to leave that alone. I'm going to leave that alone. But I don't know, we might come back to that, people. We may come back to that. But you have a lot going on for you. And you think long term. Let's talk about this school. Let's talk about the school. Boys Rock. Okay, he's got a program on that, but we're going to go beyond the Boys Rock. We're going to come back to it. But let's talk about the fact that here's a guy who wants to put together a school to cover everything that's needed to be done and put all the pieces in place that you say are missing.
Yeah. So what I started seeing over the years were consistent patterns, if you will. I started seeing lead paint exposure, developmental disabilities, kids who just were not thriving in school. I started seeing a lot of the same patterns of dysfunctionalism, missing parents in the house, or parents who were physically there but not mentally there. Those who were struggling with addiction themselves, kids taking care of themselves, and young children being forced to grow up much faster than they should. And then I started to see the correlation between young adults and even older adults who just are violent, who are bitter, who are angry, and who are just frustrated. And I realized that we're not really fighting crime, we're fighting hopelessness and brokenness. There's something broken inside these people. And before they became this adult, at one point they were a child who had innocence, a child who expected the world and other adults around them to provide and take care of them. And then we were expecting them to also to thrive in an academic environment in school, where we're seeing that that's failed. And so to me, I looked at, well, what's the best way from a preventative standpoint, and it's going to be long term, that we have productive young men and women who are really in a position to do things differently and help our communities grow, that they become the next families. Because see, when I was coming up, your family meant everything. If a kid went outside the house in the wintertime and didn't have a coat on, it's not because he was cold. It's because you represented your family. And your mother or your grandmother, whoever that matriarch was that was dealing with that, it was an embarrassment for her for you to be improperly dressed. And so those are the things, you know, you knew the Smiths or the Robinsons or the Johnsons or the Greens. You always knew who those families were. And people took pride in that family relationship and that bond. You know, now I've seen kids curse mom out, curse dad out. There's a lack of respect. They're getting high with them. It's just outrageous. And so...
And it's generational.
And it's generational, and that's the problem. And so for me, we have to do better. And I think the way that we do better is we give them options. And the way that kids get option is we have to recognize that every child is capable of learning, right? Whether they're special ed or they have some learning difficulties, whatever, but every child is capable of learning. So that's the first premise. Number two, every child is not college bound. Somebody's got to build the building. Somebody's got to build the infrastructure. Somebody's got to be the banker or the security guard or whatever. Everybody has a purpose and a function in which you will contribute to society.
And that's where skills come in.
And that's where the skills come in. Right now, our kids are being educated to take tests. I'm so sick of hearing about measurements and tests and things of that nature. Where are the skills and building blocks for these kids to be able to, when you walk out that door in high school, if you never hit a doorstep on anybody's college, you should be able to go out here and get a job.
And the funny thing is, like you said, kids go to school to learn to pass the test. So basically, you're going to school to learn to pass, to answer questions that we've given you.
Yep.
Okay, now throw a question on there that we didn't give you.
Right.
Can you figure that one out?
Right. Because
and that's,
we don't
that's
have
a
logic.
scary thing.
And that's the same thing that happened with me with law school. I was a smart kid. I could always memorize things. I had I still do have the great ability to just recall detail to things that are there and memory. And the hardest transition was, okay, so here's this, here's that, here's the other. Now we're going to take one of these things away. Now what do you have? And I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. Okay, this is a little different. Because I was so used to saying you got A, B, and C. Okay, there's A, B, and C. There's B, A, and C. C, A, and B. I can give it to you any way that you want. But when you took one of those things out, it was like, whoa, I got to think about this a little differently now. And so we've got to get back to that part of getting our kids to become critical thinkers, not just memorize and regurgitate this information, but how to critically use it and apply it to what they need in order to be successful.
And how to learn. One of the things that my mother was always focused on when we were kids, and my sister Regina, was how to learn.
Right.
You need to learn how to learn. So that way, when you have a question, okay, how do I figure this out myself? Where do I get these answers from? And a lot of times we just don't see that anymore because we just don't. We don't see it anymore. So this school that I think is a great idea, we've talked about it before. How soon? When? What's it take? Because this is a big deal. This is a very big deal.
It's huge. So one of the things that so what I've been doing is I've been networking my butt off. I've been meeting with the elected. I've been I finished the first cohort for planning in Baltimore City. So I got an idea of how that whole infrastructure works, from acquiring a building and the zoning and from the academics and going down to City Hall and listening in on those, going to the Board of Education, just getting myself really up to speed, working with grant writers, going in there looking at those who can develop curriculums, and then just taking some of the basic things that I understood and understand about kids, in particular working with kids coming from devastating communities and devastated and dysfunctional environments at the house, and saying, how do we better educate these kids? And one of the things I realized is that schools are now being used as daycares, right?
Yeah,
so
you know where they are from this time to this time, and it's okay.
And that's okay, right. But so for me, so not only do I do criminal defense work, but I do plaintiff work, I do civil work, I do family law. But I've dealt with situations where I've represented fathers who only want to have a relationship with their child, but the mother will withhold the child because she's more concerned with who's that girlfriend for the weekend that my child's going to be exposed to, but will not take herself to that school Monday through Friday to find out who the teachers are that are dealing with and responsible for their child. It's just mind-blowing. So the school is basically going back to basics, going back old school. It's a community-based concept. One of the things or part of the core curriculum will be every child will learn how to play chess. Critical thinking, long-term thinking. Not checkers, not what's immediate, but long-term. Learning how to strategize and think down the road. Every child will participate in debate, learning how to orate or to orally have your disagreement and understand effectively and appreciate what another person is saying and being able to take it, process it, and then give them something different. Kids get frustrated, and if I can't effectively communicate, the first thing I want to do is I want to put the hands up. I want to reach out. But so we want to give them those oral skills. The other thing is we want to make sure that we are trade-oriented all the way through. Whatever's the technology, so I want STEM as my primary base because that's the direction that we're going in. We need to take something from our Asian community and understand how they're gearing them up as early as possible.
Did you hear what he said? Did you hear that, everybody?
So we want to do that. And then I also want to have a bridge. I want to go back to the old school values of having children respect adults, and then we have a greater respect for our seniors. those senior citizen homes, they're going to be a part of our teaching staff. They're going to come in and they're going to help give these kids some of that basic relationship, because for me, I remember as a kid how excited I was to be up underneath my grandfather and listen to the old men tell their stories, because that was a part of the education you just couldn't get inside those four walls.
We talked about this a while. I did a post on it, and it's crazy, because I'm telling you, people, once these seniors are gone, unless you took the time to talk to them about the history of your family or your roots or the community or whatever, they're past.
That's gone.
They're all lessons for the future.
Absolutely.
And once it's gone, it's gone. So you need to go sit down and talk to grandmom or grandpop or whoever it is in your neighborhood, but because that's an important piece of growing that I think that we're missing. And now we have grandmothers who are less than 20 years old, 30 years old.
It's mind-blowing. So, and then the other part of it is allowing children to be children. Elementary will be separated from middle school. Middle school will be separated from high school. Let them grow and mature as they are supposed to. Mixing them together, they're exposed to too much. They got enough that they're dealing with at home.
And on social media and on
social
television.
Media, absolutely. So it's and the cost of tuition, parents must actively be members of our Parent-Teacher Association and must donate 100 hours of community service every year.
100 hours a year. Okay, that's less than two. That's a little bit more than 2 40-hour work weeks. Listen to what he said. What do you got to do? What's the tuition for it?
100 hours of community service per parent, and they must be active members, meaning serve on a board or on a committee of our Parent-Teacher Association. You have to be an active member in that school with your child.
So what is your biggest hurdle in getting this thing going, and how can people help you?
So right now I have grant writers, as the young kids say. I got grant writers on deck. I have curriculum writers on deck. I've got a lot of support from other folk. I've just got to find a building, and then I've just got to put my application together and go before the Board of Education and say, hey, I'm making an application. I want my charter. Here's where we are. Have everything set up. Have my budget lined up. All those the more critical things. That's the easy part. Getting that building and getting it approved, because another thing is, even if you could find a building, you're also still talking about, we got to make sure that we've got environmental factors. I don't want to pull you out of one negative environmental factor,
and
which you're dealing with
another one,
and put you in another one. Got to make sure it's lead free.
Yep.
I want to make sure that we have a green a school that, when we're talking about STEM, I also want the parents to participate in that community, to help participate in renovating it and making it, because I want you to take pride in saying, that's mine. That's just not where my kid goes to school, but that's my school.
We're part of this family here. That's right.
I put blood, sweat, and tears into this. It's just like my crime plan. I'd like to come up with an amnesty program in that immediate community. If there's somebody who's out there who's hustling, if you will, and they're selling drugs, guess what? You sign a contract with the local law enforcement, the local state's attorney's office, and the feds. We confiscate all of your proceeds. And that same block that you were selling those drugs in, you're going to buy that corner store and you're going to make it a green station where you're going to have alternative foods with fruits and vegetables and things like that. Those houses that were abandoned that you had people shooting up drugs in there, you're going to fix it up and create affordable housing. You can collect rent. You can do all those things to legitimize that money. And if we get one whiff that you're doing something wrong, you forfeit it. You go to jail and you're done.
All right.
And guess what? They're going to help you police that community, because they're not going to want to go back to jail, and they're not going to let that little guy get on that corner because he goes, hey, that's my block. What better way to have somebody brag about that's my block, and it not be my little hustlers that are out there, but that's literally my block. That's monopoly.
That's monopoly.
I own that store. I own those 4 houses. I'm collecting rent. I'm paying taxes. I'm contributing to the community that I devastated, and I've turned my life around. And I don't have to look over my shoulders.
And I don't have to be in jail.
I don't have to be in jail.
See, now, okay, I asked you before, and now, see, this is why I had Russell on this show, and I've been chasing him down for quite a bit. So, why didn't you run for mayor?
You know what? Here's the thing. Sometimes it's best to be the kingmaker instead of being the king. You can get so much done behind the scenes. You really can. I don't think Baltimore is ready for somebody like me. I'm too radical. I think too pragmatically. I think too just straight to the point. I don't believe in fluff. I'm not going to tell you what you want to hear. I'm going to tell you what I think works. And that's not what people want. You can't get in bed with me and think that your comforter is going to be different somehow because you got in bed with me. When you get in bed with me, you get in bed with the rest of the city of Baltimore, because we're all in the same bed together. That's the problem. This development, we got a trash problem. Trash, like they always say when it comes to make somebody's trash is somebody else's treasure. Well, guess what, Baltimore? All of our trash is actually our treasure. And I say that because why is it that we're not taking all of these plastics, these woods, these plaster, the drywall recyclables, and making it into composite building material that is stronger, more durable than wood itself? You make these outside developers come in, 40% of the goods that you buy, which is our composite, that we build our own smelting factory to put it together, you got to buy it in order to build these buildings. We're putting people to work, we're taking care of our trash problem, and we're earning money because we're making them buy some of the actual supplies that they need to use to build. It blows my mind. It blows my mind.
See, this is why I have him on this show. And now I like a lot of the stuff that you say. And you and I've always talk about, and this like I said, I call him all the time. He answers the phone. I come up with crazy questions, but the stuff that you talk about is good. It's inspirational, and it's a glimpse into a positive future. And granted, I'll give you this one time that I do think that you have a better goal than just being mayor, because I think that what happens is what we need is ground roots building for our future.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
You've already covered stuff environmentally. You talked about the schools. You talked about the crime. So you know what I'm. So if you win as mayor, you need to call this man. But on a more important note, I really think that anybody who's watching this and listens to a lot of the stuff that Russell Neverdon has said, you really need to contact him, and especially when it comes to this school thing. Sit and think about the possibilities of what he's talking about and what we can do. Think about what you said when it comes to getting these repeat offenders who are drug dealers, who have more money than I do, and I go to work every day, okay? And what we can do with the resources and the stuff that we have.
Think about it.
It's incredible. I like it.
Think about it. When the government locks them up, they forfeit their assets. They take them to hire more officers, to buy more technology and things of that nature, to go lock up more. But wouldn't it be so much better if you could take them, turn it around, and get them to reinvest in the same community that they tore up? And you sign a contract. It's like a confessed judgment. I'm already admitting, if you prove your case against me and you catch me, all I need is surveillance to show you doing a hand-to-hand, and I'm done. I'm done. And I walk away from everything. And you know what we do? We give the next guy in line, now you get a shot. Now you get to walk away from if you have choices.
And the thing is, if people see that Ray walked away and he's doing all this, they're going to do the same thing.
Absolutely.
It's the domino effect.
As I tell my clients, there is so much legitimate money out here that it is sickening. You just got to be dedicated, and you got to be committed to saying, I want better. If you want better, you have to do better. If you want different, you have to think and do different.
Now, lastly, let's talk about Boys Rock.
Yes.
We talked about everything else, and we talked about the food. And just so you know, you thought I called and bugged the hell out of you before. I'm going to really bother you now, because we're going to be pushing some of the stuff you're talking about, and you got some really good ideas. And as Guardian Angels and community service and activism, this is the kind of stuff I need. I've been trying to get him to put on a beret for years, but I mean, now we got a school to build. After that, then he can come over and take my job and run Baltimore. We'll get him. You heard what he said. You heard that. He say it again.
He'll get me.
There you go. All right. So let's talk about Boys Rock, which is another one.
So Boys Rock is the inception came from me just putting out so much work with our youth, going from partnering with from Roland Patterson Middle School to West Baltimore Middle School to I've worked with the Green Street Academy. I've worked with a lot of different schools and worked with teachers. One, helping teachers on educational law and how to protect themselves when they're dealing with some difficult situations, but more importantly, to also provide mentorship. And I'm not talking about more so than mentorship, but modeling, letting these kids know that I come from the same environment that you do. In a lot of instances with having, not having mom and dad there. Mom struggled with dealing with drugs, dad in and out of the prison system, with my grandparents, moved from one family member's house to another, but periods of stability, but still had that wraparound that a lot of these kids unfortunately are missing, still had that wraparound support. So I get it, but I also know that unless you have somebody that you feel like can relate to you, it's difficult. That one of the worst things that kids walk around, and I know that I dealt with for years, was that missing parent syndrome. No child wants to feel like they don't belong, that they're not wanted, that they're not loved. And so despite the fact of having phenomenal grandparents, incredible aunts and uncles, a host of neighbors that actually participated in that process, great teachers, there's always still that one piece in the back of the mind, like, why didn't you love me? And that's a frustration and a piece that
you never get over in time. It's a hole you can't fill.
Absolutely. And so now when you're dealing with that, you wonder why these guys are gravitating towards gangs, or why they're gravitating towards these little cliques or folk that are doing things, because it's a sense of belonging and somebody appreciating and finding value in me. So, so I look at those things, and I'm always saying, let me talk to these kids and just have that raw, unadulterated conversation with them to let them know you're not by yourself, and getting them to open up. But I also realize that in opening them up, I'm also opening it up to exposing them to options and opportunity. So a good, very dear friend of mine, Pam Curtis, who is, and I don't know,
I follow her stuff. Pam, I follow your stuff. I think you do amazing stuff. And before you know it, you're going to be sitting in the chair that Russell's in. We're going to be talking about it.
Let me tell you something.
She's pretty amazing.
She is an amazing woman, raising 2 kids for the most part. Not for the most part, but raising 2 young men on her own. And if you see her at a housing education seminar, her kids are with her. If you see her in a community involved information, they're right there. She is preparing these young men to actually do the kind of work that needs to be done.
And that's pushing the vision.
Pushing her vision.
She is amazing.
And she
really
pushes
is.
the vision for everybody. And I told her, you got to stop there and start pushing your own, because she's got a lot that's there. But more importantly, she and I work together, as well as Marcus Dent, the other Marcus Dent.
Marcus Dent, no relay. I know. Hey, Marcus, how you doing, buddy? Because I go into a room and they say, well, you're not that Marcus Dent. I said, no,
right.
Not that Marcus.
But
we have funny conversations about that also. But yeah, Marcus is a good guy.
Marcus, you got Arthur Squeaky Kirk. These are people who are just out there putting the work in, that are just grinding day in and day out, that are putting that kind of work. So having partnerships and relationships with them, I realized that I could just do something a little different in my mentorship with the kids. And so Boys Rock was created, because my thing was, I want to build new leaders of the future. And what better way to do that? So with Boys Rock, which is building our youth successfully so that they will rebuild our communities, that's why I came up with that acronym, Boys Rock. And for me, it's really about getting into their minds, letting them know that they have options, reaffirming that you have value, you have purpose, and it is a sin for you to waste your life, either to lose it through violence or to just walk away from being as great as we know that you are capable of being. Everybody has a purpose, and we are interconnected. God has us intertwined like that. One person missing changes the trajectory of everybody else's life, and I emphasize that to them. You have value. I don't care how down you feel like you are. Trust me, there's somebody who feels lower. I don't care how alone you feel you are. There's somebody who feels even more isolated. But the goal is recognize that all of us carry baggage around. The difference is getting to the point and learning the skills of how to recognize what's luggage that we can reuse and what's garbage that we got to throw away. Right? And so that's how I work with these kids and let them know you have value, you have importance, you have purpose, and we need to use that up because you serve in the greater good of this whole function. You're going to come back to this community, you're going to make a difference. I'm going to show you how to be a leader. I'm going to put you in contact with folk. I'm going to show you how to network. I'm going to expose you to as much as I possibly can, from shadow me when I go to court. Come to my office and do a little internship right there. Let me introduce you to some of my friends who are physicians, or who are doctors, or who are that contractor, that teacher, whomever. I want them to know that we are real people. We're not the basketball players. We're not the football and NFL stars. We are very real people that are right here, that are tangible, that you can reach out to and say, how do I do that?
And I've seen it within the Guardian Angels. And one of the things you're talking about, when you grab somebody, you take them into another whole kind of a world. And it's funny because it all starts, like you said, with the gang people. And you see, the saddest thing is to see a child or a teenager or in a corner whose parents can't tell them, you're important to me and I love you. But when they leave their boys at that corner every night where they say, all right, man, I see you tomorrow, I love you, bro.
Yeah.
They get that.
Yep.
They get that.
Absolutely.
But it's a big deal when you get these kids, and like you said, when they shadow you or they meet the people and then they go into meetings and buildings and go to places where they've never had the experience, and they feel important and empowered, not because you're dragging them along, because you're making them a part of what it is you have going on. And it's such a big deal. A lot, I've been lucky. I was raised by my sisters and grandmother and mother. You know, I had females that all basically taught me how to be a man. But I was lucky enough to have mentors come into my life who were police and FBI and adults who took me and said, hey, I'm going to show you how to play baseball. I'm going to show you, you know, what we do at our jobs. And these things you can't you can't live without them, because I look back when I think about when you know we talked about my youth and my childhood, and a lot of the stuff that I learned growing up, I learned from my mentors who were professional adults who came up and said, hey, come here, I want to show you something. And they took the time to invest to teach me
And
things.
I'm glad you said that. You said when they said, let me show you something, because the new model or the new philosophy has to be, mentoring is not enough. We also have to model.
That's right.
Because children don't do what we tell them. They do what they see.
They do what they see.
So
and
the mentorship is guiding them, giving that advice, giving them that lecture, talking to them, talking with them, and helping them develop. But the modeling is walking the walk and not just talking the talk.
That's it.
Do as you see, not as I say.
Not as I say.
And that's
do
what they got to see.
And because it's very important. It's very important out there that you have to be the example you want to be.
Absolutely.
And so it doesn't come in sometimes, oh, I'm smoking this cigarette, I got to put this down, you know, when he comes over. But at the same time, you got to be consistent at what it is you do, because, and you have children, I have children, and they literally, you can tell them one thing and you can act like, oh, they're not listening to me. They're listening. They're listening, they're watching, and they're repeating everything you say. So really, you should end up with a bunch of mini-me's, because they take in everything we give them. It's like pouring stuff into a glass. Whatever comes out of us goes into them. And that's not just your kids, that's the community kids, that's the neighborhood kids, that's the kids that you work with, that's everybody that you touch in life.
And we have
they
to
feed off of
we
you.
have to be invested in other people's children besides
it takes a village, people. It takes the village, and that's a real thing.
We really do. We really have to be invested in other people's children's lives. You know, we can't walk around on eggshells. And here's the segue that I always tell people: if you're doing it for the right reason, then what you should be able to do, because you should have that relationship with your neighbor, I should be able to tell you and come to you and say, you know, even if your child came running home and say, you know, Mr. Russell said, and he did X, Y, and Z, and mom come out with an attitude, I'm saying, look, let me tell you something. I watch you raise this young man. I watch the sacrifices you make day in and day out. And I'm going to be your eyes and ears, because I'm not going to let him go out here and embarrass all the hard work that you've been putting into this child. I know what you're doing. I know how hard you work for him to go out and have the clothes that he has, and to get a good education, and you busting your butt going in and out of work, for you to have to be called off work to go, if I saw it, I addressed it, I didn't disrespect him, I didn't put my hands on him, but I let him know that's unacceptable, and I called you myself to tell you this is what he was doing. That whole dynamic changes, because now they realize, whoa, wait a minute, you out here embarrassing me?
And it changes because of how you came off and you told it to them. But at the same time, we do have the parents out there where you've seen it in the neighborhoods where
not my baby.
Your kids do. Well, who are you to tell my kid what to do? Y'all need. And I've seen parents get defensive and go after this, and instead of taking a step back and saying, wait a minute, we're looking out for your kid because you weren't. And there's a lot of people that just don't. You know, you're agitated because they came home and it's still daylight outside. Why don't you go outside and play? Go find something to do with yourself. And now they're out finding something to do. But when somebody comes out and says, hey, they're doing something wrong, you need to know about this. Now it's a problem. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it does take a village. And we have to, I don't know how we get back to that, but we got to
start looking in the mirror. And, you know, and I'm always the first to say that, you know what, at the end of the day, we have to be very real and transparent with ourselves before we can be real and transparent with anybody else. We really have to. You know, none of us walk around with a glass slipper on our foot and think that nothing's going to happen, that heel won't break. Our kids are capable of failing and falling short. And we have to be prepared and strong enough to love them through the experience, love them through the mistake, correct them,
and let them know it's okay.
And let them know it's okay to make a mistake.
It's okay.
And pray that the seeds we plant in them will harvest at the time when it's needed. That when they're confronted with making that decision whether I'm gonna break the law or not, all those being in their ear and staying in their butt and over and over and over again the things that you've said and tried to instill in them, when they get up to that line, we pray that that what you've said has stayed with them so strongly that they say, that's a line I just can't cross. I'm gonna tell you, when we talk about, you know, those of us who are 50 and over, I think about some of the things that we weren't worried about venereal diseases. The utilization of prophylactics and protection was because it was a sin to have somebody pregnant out of wedlock.
Look,
That was, you know, the
That's
heck,
a whole different.
the heck with that part. It was more of, this is an embarrassment to my family.
You don't even hear about that anymore.
You don't.
You don't hear about it now because it's okay. It's an embarrassment to tell you not to get into that situation.
Right.
And remember before it was like, you know, listen,
Right.
it was taboo. You just didn't do it.
You
It
right.
just didn't
So you
do
weren't
it.
worried about that part. You were more worried about embarrassing the family name and having somebody pregnant with a child
Yep.
out of wedlock. It's the we got to get back to those core values and let these kids, let them be children, let them grow up, give them that opportunity, because you only get to be a child once,
That's right.
and you
That's
get to be an adult for a long time.
And it's going to be even longer if you have kids.
Yep.
You know, as a child. So yeah, it's a big deal. But Russell Neverdon, he's got a lot of good stuff going on. We're going to leave him alone because he's got the school going on, because I was going to push the mayor issue, but I think the school thing is more important. And he's, you know, with the Boys Rock, the foundation, all the great ideas. But guys, if you watch this video, you know, my biggest thing about this whole interview is the school, and we've talked about it. And, you know, if I was one of these famous rich people in Baltimore, or somebody a politician that could say, I can make that happen and this would make me look good, I'd make that school thing a reality. But I think, like I said, I'm always inspired by what it is you do. I'm still going to bug the hell out of you when it comes to questions and concerns. And, you know, I'm going to order the beret and the red jacket and all that stuff. We're going to snatch him. You heard him say it here, because I think if he says no, and I mean, we got it on tape, so I think we can come after him in court for that. That's like a verbal contract. We got this. We got this. But I want to thank you for coming on here. I want to thank you for all it is you do. I want to thank you for everything you do. And this is Strider. This is Beyond the Streets. This is Russell Neverdon, and we will see you next time.
Today we are going to be interviewing a woman who is from Germany, and she has written a book, and this is it right here. It's called Death is Not the End: Understanding the Transition Between Lives. And, you know, all the way from Germany, we have with us today Inez Bayer. And welcome, Inez.
Hello, Paul. Thank you so much for having me.
It's wonderful to have you. And so we want to talk about this really interesting book of yours. And first, I guess for people who want to know, because they hear the title, explain a little bit of what the book is about.
Yes. The book is meant actually for those who, for those people who maybe have an idea of an afterlife, or maybe just a belief, or they're wondering about that. A lot of times that happens when there's a death in the family, or somebody gets a diagnosis, or that they themselves are close to death, or somebody had an accident, and they start wondering a little bit, so what happens after death? And but it's more like an idea or a concept, or it's based on a religion that people have, that it's a part of their tradition. But there are studies, after death studies, actually more scientifically, that show evidence for the survival of the consciousness after death. And what I wanted to do is to, because I read, you know, as we'll probably discuss more how I got into this, but I had a phase where I for my own reasons, was wondering about what happens after death and researching death and near-death experiences and out-of-body experiences. And what I found is that there is a lot of studies. There are doctors, medical doctors, cardiologists, neurosurgeons who study near-death experiences and consciousness after death, and that most people don't know about these studies. Most people have no clue, except for the main followers that are already into this. So what I wanted to do is just package all this kind of evidence together a little bit in this book, Death is Not the End, to kind of show why we may exist after death, or why I am convinced that we exist after death.
Okay, because I know a lot of people, of course, are also, they fear death. They also, some people say there's heaven, some people say there's nothing, you just die. And of course, you have a whole different perspective on that. And I think you got a little bit of the next question I was going to ask you, then why did you write this book? So maybe at that point, to go into it, is your personal near-death experience, your NDE?
I had actually didn't have a specific near-death experience, but I've had a lot of experience with out-of-body. I've actually been part of a nonprofit. We've taught classes in out-of-body experiences. But more than that, the reason why I studied death specifically was that I had a health crisis in my early 20s. In fact, I was diagnosed with HIV, and I was 23 at the time, and I didn't know what that meant. I thought I was going to die in 10 years, and so I learned to live with that and to wrap my mind around it, but kind of this whole idea of death stuck in my mind, and what comes next. And of course, now many years later, a lot has changed. Actually, we can live well into retirement age and have healthy, good lives. But again, at that point, I didn't know that. And also, I was kind of stubborn and refusing to take the medication for a while. I tried to do everything natural and not put chemicals in my body, and I didn't want to take these medications, which I heard were toxic, or that some people even died from taking these drugs, or they can have an allergic reaction to it and die. So in a way, I was avoiding them for 5 years. And then my health started to worsen. I did okay, but at some point my T-cell count got lower and lower, and I realized that I was getting close to having AIDS, at which point you basically can, catch a flu or food poisoning, and you can die from that. So at that point, it was like, okay, well, do I want to continue on what I'm doing, not taking the medications? Then I will likely die. Do I want to take the medication? And in my mind, I thought I was going to die from taking the medication. So I had this crisis for many weeks where I thought either way, somehow I was going to die. And then that led me into more of a spiritual search of how can I make peace with it? And I really wanted to read all I could about the topic. So that's how I got to study all the different fields. So one is the near-death experiences, of course. There's also out-of-body experiences. And we can talk more about out-of-body experiences because, again, I have more experience with that. I've taught classes in out-of-body experiences. I've had many of them. And there's also extrasensory perception. There's research in memories of past lives. Through hypnosis, but also there are studies of children who remember their past lives, and there are so many different topics that all kind of intertwine in the end, but each of the fields kind of gives a little bit of evidence of that our soul, our essence, our whatever you want to call that, spirit, is something that is more eternal and it's just the physical body that dies. And essentially, we do not have to fear. So that's the main message, right? That I want to give people some more information, that they don't have to fear death.
Okay, well, your book certainly is very detailed. It does give a lot of that research. And for people who may want to see more or inquire, you have studies to back up a lot of the things you say in the book. And there are also examples of, not examples, but exercises people can do in the book. And so that's very good. Now, I know you said you're doing on your personal journey of exploration, but where did you find, and talk a little bit about the training you got at this institute?
First of all, I have to say I've had out-of-body experiences since I was younger, more spontaneously, maybe once a year. So I knew I had them, they were real, but I couldn't quite categorize it, or I couldn't produce it at will. So I ended up finding the IAC at the time, International Academy of Consciousness, who studies consciousness development and especially training people to have out-of-body experiences, because with the out-of-body experience, the unique thing is that it's not like a near-death experience where the body dies or you're in a critical situation, might not be able to return. But out-of-body experiences you can train in a very healthy way. And it's like playing the piano. You just have to dedicate some time and some effort, and it's mostly energetic training and out-of-body exercises that you can do to leave the body. But the unique thing about that is when you leave your physical body in that state, you are in that the same state that you are basically when you die. Only that you can look back down at your bed and you can look at your body lying there in bed. And also you have a silver cord connected to your non-physical body, and you will come back to the body at any time, or you can. But what you can get is a preview of the other non-physical dimensions. And these are the same realms where our loved ones go when they die, where consciousness or souls are before they are born. And so we can gather a lot of information from these realms. And that to me was very fascinating. So I started taking their classes, and I had many more out-of-body experiences, and also had more of a desire to teach this to people as well, because it's one thing to hear a story or even to read a book about this topic, but it's another thing to actually have the experience yourself, right? Because they say a picture is worth 1,000 words, and an experience is worth even more. So having actually been there, having seen it for yourself, changes the whole game, right? And it's not that you need to convince anybody else, but if I can do it and I can see it for myself, then that's all you need.
But what can the out-of-body experiences, or I guess it's the same as some people would say is astral projection, what can that teach us? The most important paradigm that it teaches us is that we are more than this one physical body, and that in essence, if I can leave my body and let this one go, and I have more bodies in the future, and I also had different lifetimes in the past, it kind of broadens our whole perspective of who we are, and puts it in a whole different context. So normally we live in this life, and it's like, okay, we try to do our best, and one day we're gonna die, and it's all over. And maybe then we don't need to worry so much about stepping on other people's toes, or it doesn't really matter how we get ahead. But if we know there's something maybe like karma, that whatever we do in this life also will affect us in our next life, and maybe those people that we are having
interactions with, good or bad, that we're going to see them in the afterlife and also in our future lives, perhaps. And that especially certain big things that have happened, as I would say, more in the past, because in this life now we're more civil with each other. But maybe 300-400 years ago, we would just, kill someone very easily. And then that could be something that affects us still today. But having that kind of awareness, and that's something that you see in the out-of-body state, because you can remember past lives a lot better in that state, because what you're doing is you're using that body that has been doing all these incarnations. So the non-physical body is the one that enters the physical one, and then when you die, it's again the non-physical body. So that one remains the same, and that's where the memories are. While this body, this brain dies, and the memories are going to be gone. So when I leave the body and I'm in that, using the non-physical body and that access that memory, I can see the bigger picture. And it can also be, I guess, some people don't like to think about it because it means more responsibility in a way of who we are, our actions, and what we do in our lives. But that's also a good thing, because then we take more care of each other.
Because we're going to run into the next thing I want to bring you to is about our multiple existences or lives that we had and we will have, is to ask you this question. With each existence, do we kind of not only learn but advance, or are there times you can have a future life and you've regressed somehow?
From the way that I understand it, and I don't know the total truth, but from the way I understand the research that we have done, and from my own experience, there is a progression, there's a evolution, you could say an evolution of consciousness, so that with each lifetime that we have, we do evolve to more complexity, or more, you could say, we become more wholesome in a way. And just as we do in this life, right? So when we're 20 years old, we are less mature, we make some decisions that aren't good, that we wouldn't do when we're 50. And then as we're 50, we have a lot of life experience, we have done things wrong and good, and we have learned from them, and we kind of adjust what we do. And the same thing basically that we do during one life, ideally, right? Because some people, they can be 80 and they can still be like a 20-year-old. But most people, we grow and we mature and we make better choices later on. So if the same thing then extends to multiple lives. So I wouldn't say that you go back to a lesser state. You don't become a better person, but you also don't become a worse person necessarily. But there are different theories, different authors that I also have read, who some say that there isn't this idea of time essentially, and you could go back to other times and different situations, and you could incarnate to be a bad guy or a good guy. I'm not quite sure if that makes very much sense to me.
Because part of what I look at, is to say that, if you get in tune with, let's say, a past life. I mean, can you imagine, for example, because you're in Germany, a person alive today can go to a past life and say, oh my God, I was Hitler. I mean, that's quite a burden for that person, Or if Eastern philosophy is kind of what you're talking about, except some of what you're saying more than we do in the West, but I don't forget who it is, whether it's Hindu or whatever. They say, oh, well, you're a person now, but you might come back as a bug or a dog or something in your next life. But you're saying we don't come to a lower or different species. We continue as in a human body with our consciousness.
Yeah, I would say a more complex and evolved consciousness. It wouldn't really make a lot of sense for our understanding, our development now, to go back into a cat's body, unless they're very evolved beings, which could also be possible. And there are also ideas that animals, they are a consciousness level in themselves, And I do believe maybe we have come from that. But in essence, we also haven't seen that many cases. I've read some cases, but most past lives books and the research that I have done is more progressive.
Well, that's good. That's encouraging for everybody. I mean, it's sort of like part of what you're saying. Some people will recognize when they say, this person is an old soul. You know, they'll say, it seems like you've been here before. Yes. You know so much. You might be like 20 or 30 and seem to be very wise, you know. And that may be something they've gotten from previous existences. Or gave me a different thought, because I gave a lot of thought to some of the things you wrote in your book. Is it sometimes you might say, oh, maybe a 20 or 30-year-old woman with a 50, 60-year-old man, but it may be she's older, you know, as far as progressively, you know, she may be, you know, they're more for each other because it's not her physical body, you know, that her consciousness is more mature, and so they make a good couple sometimes. And so that's a possibility, you know, so many things. Now, the thing to talk about, you know, when we're no longer here, you have a whole section and talk about between lives and how that could be decades, centuries, I don't know how long, but that things go on for us when the consciousness are between physical bodies. And could you talk about that a little bit?
Yes, so between lives, essentially, once you drop the physical body, you're in the non-physical planes. There are hundreds, thousands of them, where we kind of have a home dimension where we go, and at first, after we die, at the very first, usually there's a few days where we are more dense in state, and we can actually go around, and some people may even see us. Let's say let me use me as an example. Let's say I die tomorrow. I could go, let's say, to my parents' house, and they might see me or feel me, and that's where a lot of after-death communications happen. So usually it's around 3-4 days right after death. A lot of phenomena happens right around that, where it's denser and it's more visible and energetically that the soul that's departing can then go around and say their goodbyes in a way, or they sometimes show up in dreams. That's very common. 40% of there's a study in a book called Hello from Heaven of Bill and Judy Guggenheim, I think. They studied this, and then they found it's 40% of Americans have had at least one of these kinds of after-death communications. So that's not a small number. And so that happens right after death. And then there's a period where the consciousness has a possibility to reflect on their past lives and to kind of see, you know, what, looking back, what could they have done better or what went well. Not in a punishing way or anything, but it's just more like a self-reflection. And also in that state, you have a lot more information available. You kind of also remember what was the plan when you entered the body, and did you kind of execute that plan in a way or not, or where did you get distracted, or was there something that you really accomplished well this time that you couldn't do in your past lives. And then there's a period of rest. It also depends on what has happened, right? If it's an accident, something very shocking happening fast, there could be a shock, even extra physically. I might need some rest there. If it's a natural death and I'm 80 years old and it happens during sleep, then it's very peaceful. It's not that traumatic. So then it's very much easier to move on. And it also depends on each person of how they understand themselves in the context of multiple lives. And so there's this awareness level. So there's some consciousness who can be drawn back to their physical life, who might get stuck here, who might not even know that they have died. And then there are, the ideal is that you pass on and you go through a second stage where where you discard more of the denser energies and you kind of let go of that life that you just lived. You still remember everything and you can still be in contact with your loved ones, but you're not tied to it, and you can let it go and you can move forward. And that would be the ideal condition to go through that second stage of death. That in my book I call it the second death. And then from there ends up happening a preparation then for the next life. And of course, all of this can span many years, but there are also classes you can take for preparation. There's discussions about your life mission that you might have with other people or in a team, and something that you can accomplish as a group. And so all of this will be discussed with the spiritual mentors who have more of an oversight of who needs what or who needs how people can help each other grow.
Right.
And all of this gets organized there, and there can be exercises, there can be tours to, let's say you're about to be born. You might go and visit your future parents, and you might just hang around them for a little bit. And that's also very common. Sometimes parents can feel their future baby already, or see it in the dream before it's born. Lot of different things.
Yes, apparently. I'm glad you snuck that in, because I was going to ask you, because we're getting close to running out of time on the interview, about extra-physical mentors, and you did mention those. Sort of, or as the one some people I met years ago would say, your spirit guides when you're alive.
Yes.
And
they are spirit guides. Yes.
Yeah, and I mean, and when you're actually in that in-between life state, you do have some of those what they call extra-physical mentors. Maybe people or spirits at that point, or essences or consciousness that is more evolved even than you are, but they're not in another body yet either, and they help you. So I'm going to just have one final thing here, and then we'll cut the interview, but I don't want you to go away, is that a quote that you had there, and I thought about giving some hope to people. You wrote, I think, that there is no end but a continuing journey of becoming. Do you remember writing that? And,
to be honest, I don't.
All right, but it gives people hope, I think. I think that's a great quote. It's continual becoming. There is never really an end. So you shouldn't really fear death, because only it's a transition to a state, to, an evolution, hopefully to, a higher and higher state. As some people used to say here colloquially, we keep coming back until we get it right. And so, or you might say when they cut the golden cord, maybe. Then it was in your book. And I know you mentioned, even you spelled it out, we didn't give the title of the 3 deaths, that were mentioned in your book. But
yes, there seems to be an later stage in evolution where we kind of get out of this whole cycle of coming back and evolving. We're kind of at this we're the PhD of human lives, and we don't come back anymore.
That's true. Now we want you to just to talk to people about how they can find your book and how they might be able to contact you. We ask every guest for their contact information.
Thank you, Paul. Yes, you can find me definitely through my website. It's my name, very easy, inesbayer.com. And the book is available everywhere you can buy books, on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, anywhere books are sold. It's available as a Kindle, as an ebook. And let me know what you think. Send me your feedback, or if you have any questions. I know some of the terms can be, they make you think. And I've gotten questions like, what does this mean, or how does that work? So feel free to send me an email. And also I want to mention that there is an organization called Mosaic Wellness and Education that I am volunteering for now, and they teach classes for out-of-body experiences. Actually, the next one will be in July, And you can send me an email and I forward it to Mosaic, and you can get on the newsletter, and we'll let you know when the classes are happening. They're online, so you can take it from home and then also practice at home in your own bed, which is probably the most comfortable. And I definitely recommend it, because try to do it. Go out there and explore yourself and see if it's true. I mean, I could be writing anything in my book, but you have to see if it's true.
Well, very good. Thank you, Inez, for being with us today and being the first guest, our first international guest here on the program. And
thank you so much, Paul.
Folks, that's the end of this program of Books and Authors and Windows on the World. And until next time, this is Paul Stefan.
Hey guys, Johnny Alonso, and you're watching TV Free Baltimore.
You're watching The Paul Stefan Show on TV Free Baltimore.
Hello, and welcome to our latest program. And tonight, our guest is a young woman who has had quite a journey, both geographically and in her career. And currently, she is making it as a screenwriter. And our guest tonight is Tabitha Williams. And welcome, Tabitha.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Nice to have you here. Now, you started acting at 10, was it?
Oh, yes. I played Shirley Temple.
Shirley Temple?
Yes. I sang on the Good Ship Lollipop in a variety show at school.
Interesting. And that you kept acting after that, didn't you?
I did. I continued to act until I was at university.
Wow, all the way through.
Yeah, I did some community theater in Knoxville, Tennessee as well, outside of school.
Okay, and from that you went into stagecraft? Or?
When I was at university, our professors encouraged us to study all aspects of theater. So I did design and directing, costumes, makeup, and stage management.
Wow.
Which I found really suited me. I like to organize people and projects.
And how did you get from that to doing that in London?
Well, I did a study abroad in Amsterdam and went back to finish. Well, whilst I was in Amsterdam, I did a trip to London, and I went to Stratford upon Avon, and I saw a Shakespeare theater show at the Royal Shakespeare Company. And I just saw the best theater I'd ever seen in my life, and I knew that I wanted to work in London. And so when I went back, I finished my degree and moved to London.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you were a stage manager, or I guess a stage manager for Jersey Boys?
Well, that was where I finished my stage management career. It took a little while to get to that level.
To get up to that high?
Yeah.
Okay.
My first show was a small fringe show for a theater company called Kali. They did work for Asian women writers.
Oh, okay.
And I actually applied to be a stage manager for them, and they brought me in for an interview and said, you don't have any experience in England, so we don't know any of these references. And they agreed to take me on as the assistant stage manager for an expenses-only contract. But sort of I did the rehearsal period, and then by the end of the rehearsals, one of the main cast members, who was also on the board for Kali Theater Company, asked me if I was going on the tour with them, the national tour. And I said that I couldn't, because I really needed to try and find work that paid. And she couldn't believe that I was working for expenses only. And she said, no, you're coming on tour. And that's when I got my first equity contract, and I went out on tour.
There you go.
Yep.
And you eventually got into things like Jersey Boys, and there was an award show you were involved
with?
with?
I stage managed the Laurence Olivier Awards.
Wow, that's pretty prestigious, huh?
That was very interesting.
And you got to meet probably some of the big people in British theater, at least see them from a distance.
I got to see them. I stood right next to Patrick Stewart backstage.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Captain Picard, you know.
Yes, that was really interesting. And Yes, there's too many people to name. The
quite,
Laurence Olivier Award awards is full of the best of yes.
Well, now got into that a little bit quickly because from that, how did you get to screenwriting? Because you're not a writer up to this point.
Not really. I had dabbled in writing a novel, and I'd always written poetry, and both of my parents are writers actually as well. Okay. But after making it onto Jersey Boys and doing that for a year and a bit, I started feeling like I wanted to facilitate my own vision, my own creativity. Because when you're stage managing, you're following the script. It's a lot of fun, but you're doing what you're told or what you're asked to do based on the script that you have. And I just felt like I had a lot of stories inside me that I wanted to tell. And so I started taking screenwriting classes. And that led to me organizing a screenwriting group, which I ran and was a member of in London for the last 4 or 5 years I was there.
Okay.
And so which one thing led to another, and I eventually wrote my first script. It took me 5 years actually to finish my first script. Now I churn them out in 2 or 3 months.
Wow, that's pretty good.
Yeah, but I didn't know what I was doing when I started, so that's why it took so long. I had to go through lots and lots of rewrites.
Well, there you go. Well, my question I want to have there, I'll get into a couple things. Well, the background in acting and stagecraft, how does that influence your writing?
I wasn't sure that I did. No, I'm just kidding. I think that probably from acting, I know a lot about what character dialogue should sound like, what comes natural. And also, I guess I must know a little bit about the emotional journey that an actor has to go through when they're discovering their part. So I think that I might consider those things more than someone who didn't have any experience with acting maybe. Stage managing is, you're very organized. You have to organize everything from the start pre-production process through to post-production even. And with script writing, it's a lot of organizing as well. When you start, with just your initial idea and your log line, you then have to do outlines, step outlines, and treatments, and different drafts. And so I think there's maybe something to do with the stage managing and all the organizing I did helps me organize myself in the scripts that I'm working on.
Okay, I was going to say, it's like, having that acting background, I would say, for example, so maybe somebody will read a script and say, this doesn't read true to me, but you've acted, so you could say, an actor could say, maybe she's an actor's writer, kind of a thing.
Maybe. I hadn't really thought about it much, but I do think you're right, because I do read out the dialogue, and I seem to have an ability to sense with whether something is true to the character, and if they would say that. So I feel, I've been given notes before that each character has their own voice. Mm-hmm. Which is great. That's what you want. So I suppose maybe acting might have helped me with that.
Because I'm going to say, I've had actors in here and other screenwriters, and sometimes an actor might say, well, I don't think my character would say that. Mm. Or actually I had one actor said he changed things around because the screenwriter seemed to write every one of the parts in the movie in the same voice.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, you do get a lot of scripts that you can't differentiate between the characters, and that's absolutely not what you want.
No.
I try my best not to have that happen. And you've got to really get in and learn the soul of the character, the personality and the spirit, and how they would react and how they would speak.
Because you talked about, too, being organized as, a stage manager. But part of it, too, isn't all the way then when you're writing something, look at the way things flow to say, well, from this scene to this scene to this scene, is this is how it would happen, and by being a stage manager, what maybe flows and doesn't flow. And
yes, I'm a real stickler for that. Actually, you can ask my writing partner in the UK. I sometimes will say that doesn't work. When you think about it visually, how if you're watching it on screen, how this scene moves into that scene, and I have to sometimes be a little bit careful with not over directing the script if I'm just writing it to write, because there's a difference between a shooting script and the initial screenplay, and you need to make sure as a writer that you write a screenplay and you're not writing a shooting script.
Right, there you go.
But sometimes I do think like that when I'm writing to make sure that we're moving from one to the other naturally.
But how do you get your scripts then seen by people you'd like to have produced them? Or
you have to pitch your scripts whenever you get a chance. So you have to network all the time. You have to go to screenwriters festivals, and those are a really good opportunity to network. And a lot of times there'll be managers, agents, producers, and you usually get an opportunity to pitch at those festivals as well. And you just have to do the best you can and try to get attention. But it's mostly down to networking. That's the way it's worked for me so far.
I was going to say, this is not New York, this is not LA. You know, how you get it out there, you know.
Well, when you have these festivals, that's when they bring the people from New York and LA.
Oh, they bring them.
Yeah.
Did they bring them Baltimore? No.
They bring them to Atlanta. That's where I went.
Atlanta.
I just went.
Again, all this.
Yes, the Hollywood of the South.
It is. It is the Hollywood of the East Coast these days. Now, have you ever had any of your work produced?
Not yet, but
anything in the works?
I do have. Yes.
Those ones you told me about? No.
Yes, one of the producers that I worked for as a prop master on one of his movies asked to read my movie, The Trail, and he read it and he enjoyed it, and he gave me a load of feedback and a load of notes, which was interesting, and then asked my permission to pitch it to his sales team in LA. So that was very exciting. And I also have another script called Primrose Manor that the producer asked to read my one-pager, which I gave him, and then he asked to read the treatment, which I gave him, and now he wants to read the script.
Oh.
So, and I've just finished the first draft of the script. So that script's probably going to go through about 7 drafts before it gets sent to the
before
producer.
he even sees it, maybe.
Probably, and then he'll give his notes and feedback, and it'll probably go through another draft.
Who knows? It might get picked up.
That would be amazing. I really hope so.
Well, we hope so too.
Thank
you. We have a star here. Have you ever tried thinking, because a lot of people I have in here are in what we call the DMV independent film community. Have you ever tried to work with them or sell your script to them or work with somebody who has an idea and do a film? Because a lot of independent filmmakers, you know, they're either looking for maybe a screenwriter or something sometimes, you know.
Yes. Well, I'm new to Baltimore, so I'm just now starting to network with the local film industry. And I've just met a few people with the Baltimore Film Commission, I believe it's called.
Right.
And I've been given contact information, so hopefully something will come from that. So the answer is no, not yet, but I am working on it.
Well, it probably didn't hurt to be at the Maryland Film Festival.
No, I don't think it did. And I had a great time at that festival. It was amazing. I saw some really amazing films and met a lot of really neat people. And they had a panel for screenwriters, actually, and that I got to go to and attend. And they had some people there that run the Baltimore Screenwriters Competition, and they were talking about that. And then that's where I met the professor. I think his name is David Warfield from Morgan State University. He's a professor in screenwriting, so I'm going to have a coffee with him next week.
Great.
Yes, and he's moved to Baltimore from LA.
Oh wow! So hopefully, you do a lot of networking while you're at the festival.
Exactly. That's what it's all about: networking as much as you can, and meeting as many people as you can. But I am thinking about producing one of my characters from my Trail movie. His name is Bob.
Yes.
His trail name is G-String Bob.
Right.
And for fun, I've pulled that character out of the movie and given him a comedy web series.
Oh, wow.
Yes. And so I'm hoping that I can produce that, and I'll get involved with the Maryland film industry to make that happen.
That's terrific. Now, do you have a favorite genre to work within?
Comedy.
You like comedies mostly?
I think so. I love comedy. But I also have written animation, family drama, and now a suspense romance mashup.
Okay. So, before I want to talk about some of these projects, to say that, so far, so you haven't had anything produced. So what do you do to put the bread on the table? Are you working otherwise?
Yes, I work as a property master.
Oh, you are still property master?
Yes.
For a theater company or?
For films.
Oh, for films?
Yes.
So you are getting involved with films here locally?
I am, and it's great as a screenwriter to be working on films too, because I'm learning the process of production, and it helps, I think, with my writing, and especially with the aspiration to direct as well. I'm learning by being behind the scenes on film sets.
I was going to say, have you done any other type of writing or want to do other type of writing, like writing a novel or poetry or anything?
I did write poetry most of my childhood and and teenage and university life, I wrote a lot of poetry. I've got books and books and books of poetry that I pulled out of storage that was in storage for 13 years while I was in London. So I do write poetry, but I haven't written a novel. I started one a long time ago and never finished it. I still feel, for me, that writing screenplays is the way I want to go, but I have heard that it's good for screenwriters to write a novel and vice versa.
Or short stories.
Oh, short stories. Well, I write short films.
That's true. There you go.
Yeah.
That's a short story.
That's sort of my fun hobby. If I don't have anything that I'm working on at the moment and I just want to write, I'll just sit down and write a short film.
Well, short films are good too. You pitch that around here because we've had several short films we've showed here, and then we've interviewed the directors and then the stars. And I want to do that to get that to be a regular feature of our station, so that a lot of good filmmakers get known. If they want to eventually get to a feature, why not do some shorts first?
Exactly.
And get them produced and let people see them and see what they can do. And also that's good for whoever the screenwriter is, and you're learning how to do a whole story in a compressed, maybe 20-minute format or something.
Right. I saw 2 different programs of three actually. I saw the comedy shorts, the Balti shorts, and I think it was called Close Spaces or something like that, shorts program
at the film festival.
At the film festival, and they were amazing. The production quality was that of a film, of a feature film, but obviously just in a 10-minute segment. Yeah.
Well, again, let's see. Now, I want to talk about some of the things you've done and are doing. Now, what is your background in animation? You can't actually draw and do the animating, can you?
No, I haven't done.
How do you write for animation then? Just as you normally would?
Just as you normally would, except for your characters. Well, they could be people. In my case, they were mostly cats.
Right. Talking about the adventures of Cooper and Minnie Cooper.
I did, and also the animation feature that I wrote called Meow.
The one about the switching of the bodies.
Yes, the one that Nick and I wrote. You give the characters, whether they're animals or not, you give them their own personalities, just like you would people.
Okay, and what's The Trail?
The Trail is a romantic comedy. It's about an ambitious young woman at the start of her professional career who lacks the confidence to achieve her goals and discovers that she has to climb a few mountains, confront a bear, and dance in the moonlight to find her true path. That's the log line. Wow. There's a lot going on. Hazel is working at an internship for the news team, and she desperately wants to be a travel presenter. And her boyfriend, Alan, are set to do a thru hike on the Appalachian Trail, which is his dream. But she wants to be a travel presenter, so it's a good idea for her as well. But right before they're set to leave, she gets offered a job at the news team, and she's worried she should maybe not miss out on that opportunity, even though it's not really what she wants to do. When she gets home to discuss it with Alan, he says they'll postpone the thru hike so she can take the job. When she wakes up in the morning, he's gone. Uh-oh. So she, in a frenzy, goes off after him on the trail, but she's not the skilled hiker that he was, so she finds herself without the right equipment, without the right sort of skills and knowledge of the wilderness and how to survive. And she meets a lot of quirky thru hikers that help her on her journey. And as she's doing the thru hike, trying to catch up to Alan, she starts filming her hike in a selfie-style way, making a documentary of her hike, which she then uses to try and get a job at the end of the movie.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Is this one of the movies that people are interested in? Or?
Yes. I had a producer that asked me if he could pitch it to his sales team in LA, and I said yes, definitely. And so that was supposed to happen in March. Unfortunately, that hasn't happened yet, and so I'm still kind of waiting on that. So, but we'll see. It's definitely
sounds interesting.
It's good for me that he just wants that he wants to produce it and he liked it enough, and so hopefully that'll get made. And that's the one I've pulled the character. His name's Bob. His real name's G-String Bob.
Right.
I've pulled him out of that and made a little comedy web series for him that I'm hoping to produce next spring.
That'd be interesting. Now there's a sitcom too called Fair Trade.
Yes.
And that hasn't been made yet.
That hasn't been made yet. Screenwriters have to write a lot of scripts before they actually get made.
But talk a little bit about the premise of Fair Trade.
Fair Trade it's a comedy sitcom about 3 women that work in a shop together on 0-hour contracts with no benefits. And the shop is an eco boutique that's anything but ethical. So there's 3 women there that aren't getting paid proper wages, but they're supposed to be selling all of this ethical goods and fair trade clothing.
I could see that as a Britcom, I guess.
It was written in London, and it was intended for a
And then
British
here's
audience.
another one, Across the Pond.
Across the Pond is about a disjointed American family that moved from America for the summer to London. And in their journey in London, they attempt to reunite and find happiness. And it's a family drama, and it's kind of fun to take an American family and put them in England.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of differences.
Yeah, that's the fish out of water kind of thing. You know?
Exactly, yeah.
And what about Primrose Manor?
Primrose Manor is the movie that is also with a producer at the moment that just finished the first draft of that, and it's the one I was saying. It's about an introverted postal worker who sets out to discover the letters that she's delivering to an abandoned house.
But you say there's a lot about this. I was like, there's suspense, there's thriller, there's romance, there's all kinds of. It's a real mashup.
It is a real mashup. So my writing partner Nick and I, we decided that we were going to try and write a movie under the Hallmark model to try in hopes to just sell the script as quickly as possible. But we wanted to make it sort of maybe a little more interesting than some of the current Hallmark movies you see that can be a little bit predictable. So we've got the romance there, but we've added this suspense element. So the postal worker, who's really shy, her name is Janice, she delivers letters to an abandoned house, so there's no one there, but she keeps delivering these letters, finding them in her mailbag to deliver, and eventually she decides to open up one of the letters. Even though it's against the law to open mail, she could lose her job, she could go to jail, and when she opens the letter, she discovers that it's actually intended for her.
Oh, so that's kind of sounds interesting too.
Yes.
So that's a little more intricate plotting on that one, I think.
I think so. It was a lot of fun to write, and we're now starting to write draft 2 of that project.
Oh, interesting. Now there was one, I don't know what the story on this one was, comedy web series called Coffee Guys.
Okay, Coffee Guys is I produced actually an episode of Coffee Guys in London.
Write it.
I did not write it. My friend Warren Clark was the screenwriter for that, and he was in the screenwriting group that I organized in London. And I went to the London Screenwriters Festival and met a guy there called Matt Green, who was a professional music video producer. And then my friend Warren had this comedy web series, and I wanted to produce something. And after stage managing, I felt that I would have skills that could be transferable over to producing, which was true, because it's just, again, a lot of organizing and managing and organizing especially. So we all got together, and Matt had all the equipment that we needed. So we got together, we had auditions and rehearsals, and then we shot the episode in a park in London.
Wow, terrific.
Yeah, it was a really good learning experience for me.
Has it been shown? Like we could go on YouTube and find it or something?
Unfortunately not. It will be in the future, but unfortunately we had some hiccups with the director, actually. Okay. So we weren't able to, we were missing quite a lot of the close-ups, and in order to do a reshoot, we just didn't really feel like that it would be a good idea. So I think Warren's carrying on with that project in London now, actually.
You know, you talked about the writing, the producing. Have you ever thought of saying you would like to be a writer-director?
Yes, I have, but only recently, because I love the collaborative process that takes place when you write a script, you give your script over, and then there's a director, a DOP, sound, lighting, costume, wardrobe. I really, really would love to write a script and give it over to a talented group of individuals and just see what they do with it. And so that way the director would interpret my script. So for most of my projects, I've felt that I wanted to do that, not be a director. But now that I've written the comedy web series is G-String Bob, I feel that I want to direct that project because it's a small project, so I feel that I could, if I had a really good director of photography, I would feel comfortable just focusing on the vision that I wanted and the acting, and then rely on my DOP to make sure that everything's in focus and looks good. And I think as well, the trail, I have a little sort of feeling that I would like to direct that as well.
Okay. Because part of what you said, I think off camera, I've heard other writers say this before too, you give up your script And a lot of times, and I've talked to a couple of people actually, like the one gentleman told you had 14 things produced. A lot of times they don't want the writer on set. And
I know.
Or you could see that, my God, when it gets to the screen, it's not exactly what I wrote. And you do have your check, but still, you have that emotional investment in the project. But if you're the director and the writer, you have control.
Yes, absolutely. I think that it just depends on the script, really, because when we started out to write Primrose Manor, we did decide that we were going to write it within that Hallmark model in hopes to just sell the script. And then you're not so attached to it and what they do with it at that stage. Whereas with The Trail, I am very much attached to what's written in the script. There's a scene where Hazel confronts a bear, a black bear, in the woods, and I really would like that done properly.
Now, with your writing, and a lot of writers, how much of your characters or any of your characters a lot like you? Do you put yourself in your characters?
I don't think I do.
You don't?
No.
There's not something else somebody would say, oh, it looks a little bit like something you would say or do, Tabitha. You don't get that feedback from people?
I haven't.
No?
No.
So you can totally divorce it?
I suppose.
Yeah.
I think there's me in the script, in the story, but I feel that I haven't written myself as a character.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because some people just, they're always writing themselves, you know.
Absolutely. And I participate in these screenwriting groups, and I see it all the time. You know that the screenwriter is the lead in the story. You just know it. But they write it as if they describe the character how I can see that they are, and they also speak the way the main character will speak the way that person will speak. But I try not to do that. I don't really feel... There was one... I had what I called a practice screenplay that I wrote when I first started studying, and I never finished it, but there was definitely a character in that was me.
Oh, okay.
But I suppose after time now, I don't do that.
Well, that's very interesting.
Yeah.
Now, is there anything else that you'd like to tell us before we end?
I guess that I'm just really excited to be in Baltimore. I would love to
Terrific.
I'm having a great time here, and I would love to get more involved with the local film industry and meet more writers and just see what happens. And I am going to be putting together a crew for the comedy web series, and I'm so lucky that I have actor Brian St. August working with me on that project, and he's willing to play my character Bob.
And he also knows, and I would recommend too, a great director of photography for that.
I believe so. He's
Jeff Herberger.
Yes, I believe he's mentioned him to me, and I'm also going to be going to meet Wayne Shipley as well to talk
wow!
to him.
Yes, we interviewed him too. He's
a
great guy.
I'm really excited. I'm going up to his ranch on June 5th.
Well, terrific. We were there and we filmed there.
Oh, amazing!
Yeah, we filmed. They had the movie he just did, which was Bill Tillman and the Outlaws. He has sets there at his place, and we filmed the interview in the sheriff's office.
Oh, that's really neat.
It was really cool. Well, anyway, why don't you let people out there know how to find you, give your contact information.
Well, my name is Tabitha Williams. My Gmail is Tabitha, tabatha.williams@gmail.com. And should I give my phone number as well?
Well, it's up to you.
My email is fine.
Leave it there.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, please do get in touch if you want to talk about films, or if you're a screenwriter, or if you're interested in working on a crew for a comedy web series.
Terrific. Well, again, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
It was a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Folks, so there we go. That's the end of another program. And please look around, and maybe eventually you'll see a film or a web series or a TV show with this young woman's writing credit on it. At least let's all hope so. So until next time, this is Paul Stefan, and good night.
You're watching The Paul Stefan Show on TV Free Baltimore.
Hello, I'm Steve Darnall, the publisher of Nostalgia Digest, and you're watching TV Free Baltimore. Well done.
The Despotille is on my shore, Maryland, my Maryland. His torch is at thy temple door, Maryland. the patriotic roar that fleck the streets of Baltimore, and be the battle queen of yore, Maryland, my Maryland. Thou wilt not cower in the dust, Maryland, my Maryland, thy beaming sword shall never rust. Maryland, my Maryland, remember Carroll's sacred trust, remember Howard's warlike trust, and always onward with the just. Maryland, my Maryland.
This concludes another day of live stream broadcasting from TV Free Baltimore.